Hello, my name is Caleb Dones, and my group did our project on the Internet of Things and networking security. So my portion of the project had to do with the background of the Internet of Things, some network architecture, and security mechanisms. So to start off, what is the Internet of Things? The Internet of Things refers to a system of interrelated, internet-connected objects that are able to collect and transfer data over a wireless network without human intervention. At the rapid rate that IoT is growing, tens of billions of devices are being created and put into the hands of consumers. It is projected that we will have over 21 billion devices by 2025. What is an IoT device? An IoT device is anything that is a physical object that is connected through the internet to transfer or control information. So some basic components of a device can include sensors, actuators, microcontrollers, transceiver for communication, and a radio frequency identification, which is RFID, for identification purposes. Some examples of IoT devices, you guys most likely have a lot of them around you in your homes or your apartments now. They're very common as they are extremely on the rise. So some of the big ones are Amazon Alexa and Google Home. I know a lot of people have smart bulbs. Security cameras is a big one, and smartwatches as well. I know I've seen a few smart fridges and some ovens and toasters that include IoT that are created into IoT devices. So moving on into the networking structure. So the four layers that I have here are the application layer, middleware layer, the network layer, and the sensing layer. Those last two layers, the network layer and the sensing layer, are the important ones for my presentation, as most security is put through the network layer because it has to do with the transmission of the data, the World Wide Web, which is just the internet, Wi-Fi, and routing. And routing is a big one because that's how all traffic comes in through your network into your home and out. And then the actual IoT devices, they have the hardware, and this is in the sensing layer is where the hardware is. So some of them will have a temperature sensor which may set off at a certain temperature and allow for a sprinkler to go on and stuff like that, depending on the function of the device, so what they do. So networking structure continued. So you can see here that we have the present IoT architecture. There was a previous one, and then there will also be a future model as technology advances. So you can see on this one that there are various networks that all have devices that are interconnected. These networks connect to the fog node, and then from there on they're able to be routed to the cloud and exchange information freely. Some security challenges for IoT. There are many. IoT devices are extremely vulnerable and they lack standards and regulations. They're very limited on device resources since most of them are very small, and they're hard to apply security updates if they can accept security updates at all, considering their limited resources and hardware. So some security mechanisms for IoT. Starting off, we'll go through secure hardware. So a big one is device authentication. So when two parties wish to communicate with each other, you're going to want authentication so they know who each other are. So I have listed 5 methods here. One of them, the one-way authentication, is where one identifies itself to the other. Two-way authentication, also called mutual authentication, is where both parties identify to each other. Then three-way authentication has a central authority authenticate both of the parties, and then it helps them authenticate each other. Distributed uses distributed straight authentication method between both parties, and centralized uses a centralized server or a trusted third party to distribute and manage authentication certificates that are used. So moving on to the next one, which is device identity management. This one's also very important. So you want to build confidence in the device's identity. You want to make sure that that device is what it says it is and not an imposter. So each IoT device needs a unique digital identity when connecting to a gateway or a central server to prevent malicious actors from gaining control of the system. This is accomplished through binding an identity to a cryptographic key unique per IoT device. Moving on to secure network. So access management is very important. It's basically just monitoring and controlling access to the network, and deciding who or what gains access is critical to managing a network. You don't want anybody on there that's not supposed to be there. And then one of the most important is firewalls and IPS and IDS. So firewalls can block and allow certain traffic through the ports. They are very important, so you're going to want to implement some sort of intrusion detection system or prevention system. So intrusion detection systems, they work in the network layer of the IoT system, and they can be used only to detect irregularities. So that's where intrusion prevention systems are better as opposed to detection systems, as the prevention systems can detect and act when need be. So they pick out malicious packets or incidents to log, and then they configure the firewall accordingly for future instances. So they can block off certain ports or open whichever ones they want. And then end-to-end encryption, it should be incorporated in anything that we do on the internet, honestly. So that's basically just when all your data is sent from one host to another, source to destination, and it is completely encrypted and authenticated. So on this visual on the bottom right, you can see here, for your phone, for example, you send a message, it is encrypted with your key, and then it's sent over the internet where nobody can read it because it's encrypted, and then when it arrives to its destination, it is unencrypted with that host's key, and they're able to read it. These are all my references, and this concludes my portion of our project.
Hi, this is Madison speaking, and before I begin my presentation about the Internet of Things, networking technology security, I'd like to start with my joke. So the question is, how does a tree get on the internet? And the answer is, it logs on. Alright, with that being said, let's jump into the presentation. For my portion of the research project, I focused on some examples of recent vulnerabilities discovered within IoT devices, some techniques that attackers use to exploit IoT vulnerabilities, and how to harden IoT devices to secure an IoT network. New vulnerabilities are constantly being discovered within the IoT, and their impacts range in severity from minor to critical risks. A quick overview of vulnerabilities and exploits. IoT vulnerabilities are weaknesses within a device's hardware, software, or network configuration that allows unauthorized access to the system. IoT exploits, on the other hand, take advantage of that vulnerability and act on it. Exploits have the potential to cause minor inconveniences like server outages to life-threatening events, such as car crashes. One example of a vulnerability with a severe risk was found in Chrysler cars in 2017, in which an attacker could gain total control of the car's transmission, engine, and brakes while the car was actively driving. Even scarier, the attacker could gain this access from a laptop miles away. It can be said that this vulnerability could have had catastrophic impacts if not quickly found and patched. Continuing on, I started my research by analyzing two recent vulnerabilities discovered within IoT devices. The first vulnerability I chose to analyze was discovered in 2019, and it is concerned with Amazon's Ring doorbell. The Ring doorbell consists of a motion sensor, a camera, a speaker and microphone, a doorbell, and a mobile-compatible app. The device allows two-way communication between a mobile user and the doorbell. It also provides video surveillance to the mobile end user. Researchers discovered a way to launch a man-in-the-middle attack against the Ring doorbell. The exploit allowed attackers to view the video feed or inject fake video feed into the victim's traffic. The potential dangers of this attack would allow attackers to gain valuable personal information, such as normal behavior or schedule in a victim's activity and package deliveries. The lesson learned here is that although Amazon quickly patched the vulnerability, users were required to upgrade their devices to the newest software version to enable the patches. This shows the importance of IoT device owners being aware of security events and staying on top of required updates. The second vulnerability that I researched was found to exist in a smart deadbolt for home doors. Researchers found 6 medium-severity vulnerabilities in the smart deadbolt. 3 of the 6 vulnerabilities allowed attackers to remotely unlock the door and gain access to the home. The smart deadbolt is a Bluetooth-enabled device that allows mobile users to connect to the device and remotely unlock and lock their doors. The vulnerabilities discovered are somewhat complex because it requires attackers to gain access to the mobile phone instead of the doorbell. However, once access to the mobile device is obtained, attackers are easily able to remotely control the door's deadbolt. The dangers of this exploit is that it allows attackers to gain access to homes, and it encourages attackers to focus on exploiting end users' mobile devices. The lessons learned from this vulnerability is that the manufacturer denied that the vulnerabilities existed. They claimed that the proper employment of end-to-end encryption on all command and control messages, as well as other authentication and authorization checks were in place to ensure secure operations. Even after they were confirmed to exist, the manufacturer refused to acknowledge or patch them. This response emphasizes the importance of doing proper research before purchasing IoT devices to be sure that the manufacturer is security-driven. Next, I focused on some popular exploit techniques. There are many popular open-source software tools that attackers use to exploit IoT devices. 2 of these tools are called Shodan and Wireshark. Shodan is a search engine for internet-connected devices, and Wireshark is a packet analyzer used for network troubleshooting and analysis. Both tools have the capability to do harm to a network. Shodan is a search engine for IoT devices. It can specify important information that can be useful for discovering vulnerabilities, such as which devices are connected to the internet, where they are located, who is using them, etc. Shodan can access a variety of technical devices that range from smart TVs to power plants, which is why the tool is considered so dangerous. Attackers use it by searching for specific areas of interest, such as common vulnerable open ports, specific devices, geographic location, default usernames and passwords, IP addresses, etc. Attackers can gain valuable information from these Shodan searches and use it to escalate their attacks and increase their likelihood of success. So next, I demonstrated how the Shodan tool can be used. This example shows how it would be possible to spy on a webcam. First, I browsed to the Shodan site on a web browser. Then I searched Webcam XB, which is a powerful webcam used in Windows devices, in the Shodan search bar. The image on the left shows the statistic results with a map showing the geographic locations of all the devices found from the search, and the image on the right shows one of the results, which includes the view of the webcam and other valuable information such as internet service provider, the date that the webcam was configured, the device's geographic location, and the device's IP address. I was able to easily execute this task with little experience with the Shodan tool, which further emphasizes the power and danger of the tool in the hands of an experienced hacker. Next, I researched some hardening techniques. The U.S. Department of Justice outlines several techniques to follow when hardening IoT devices. The first and one of the most important pieces of advice is to research the manufacturing company before purchasing IoT devices. The purpose of doing research on the company is to ensure that the company has a strong security posture. This can be done by looking at previous responses to vulnerabilities and the time that it took to address and patch them. Step number 2 is to secure the device as soon as possible. This requires users to download the newest security patches for known vulnerabilities. It is also recommended to change any default passwords for the device. Step 3, be sure to utilize secure password practices. A strong password should be difficult to guess, should not include personal information that is publicly available, and should be unique to each device. A strong password should also include a combination of upper and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. And step number 4 is to continuously update the device's firmware when available. Doing so will ensure that the device's patches are up to date and protected against new malwares and vulnerabilities. Continuing on with hardening steps. Step number 5. Consider disconnecting any insecure IoT devices. If the device's security is outdated, it is more vulnerable to malware infections and should be disconnected if possible. Step 6. Turn off IoT devices when idle or periodically if always on. If any malware is on the device, turning it off can erase it as many malwares are stored in memory. Step number 7. Be sure to protect routers and Wi-Fi networks. You can do this by utilizing the router's built-in firewall and using secure password practices on devices. Step number 8. Avoid a single point of failure. One vulnerable IoT device could be enough to put the entire network of devices at risk. You can avoid a single point of failure by segmenting the network, if possible, into categories and keeping each device's password unique. And finally, step number 9, use antivirus and intrusion detection products. These products protect IoT devices by detecting abnormal behavior on devices in your network, and they are typically implemented through hardware, but software versions are also available. Hardening is such an important concept when it comes to IoT network security because creating a network with strong network security from the start is the best way to prevent a breach or compromise. Network administrators have a critical role when managing the IoT network because they are the last line of defense. With all of this knowledge, tech consumers can effectively protect their IoT network by implementing this security mindset and framework. Thank you.
Internet of Things, networking tech. 3, 2, 1. Internet of Things, networking security by Kaylin Butterfield. I included a joke. So, how many programmers does it take to change a light bulb? I'll reveal the answer at the end. Advantages of IoT. Communication. IoT encourages the communication between devices. Because of this, the physical devices are able to stay connected, and total transparency is available with less problems and greater quality. Money. IoT helps devices communicate to one another, saving energy and cost. This allows the data to be shared between devices, making the systems efficient. Automation and control. Physical objects can get connected and controlled with wireless devices. Without human intervention, the machines are able to communicate with each other, leading to faster and timely output. Automation of daily tasks. This leads to better monitoring of devices by allowing you to control the completed daily tasks, avoiding human involvement. It also leads to consistency in the tasks. It can also maintain the quality of service. Information. Having more information helps make better decisions overall. Example, if your company has enough widgets and supplies, knowledge is power, and more power is better. Monitor. Monitoring the exact quality of supplies, expiration of products, etc. will improve safety. By monitoring products, it can provide information that would not have been easily collected before. Time. IoT saves a large amount of time throughout many stages. Disadvantages of IoT. Compatibility. There is no international standard of compatibility for tagging and monitoring equipment. Technical issues will persist. Today, we have Bluetooth-enabled devices, yet compatibility problems exist even in this technology. Complexity. As with all complex systems, there are more opportunities of failure. The IoT is a diverse and complex network. Any failure of or bugs in the software or hardware will have serious consequences. Even power failure can cause a lot of inconvenience. Privacy and security. When IoT data is transmitted, the risk of losing privacy increases based on how the encrypted data is kept and transmitted. Safety. Safety is ultimately in the hands of the consumer to verify any and all automation. Less employment of low-level staff. Unskilled workers could lose their jobs due to automation of daily activities. This can lead to unemployment issues in the future. Here are some disadvantages of IoT network security. The use of hard-coded or default passwords can lead to breaches. Even if passwords are modified, they won't be strong enough to prevent attacks. Many IoT devices are resource constrained, meaning they do not or cannot offer advanced security features. They rarely receive security updates mainly because it can be costly, and also it can slow down development to cause the device to not work properly. IoT security frameworks exist, but there isn't a framework that singly agreed upon. But with such a variety of standards, it's difficult to make systems secure. All of the security challenges and threats of each network technology are passed by default onto the IoT system that utilizes these technologies. An IoT system can be attacked physically within its network, on the system, and from encrypted schemes. Here's a table of IoT attacks on all levels, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to talk about the network attacks. A network attack is centered on the IoT system network, and the attacker does not need to be close to the network for the attack to work. Traffic analysis attacks. An attacker can find confidential information from the flowing radio frequency identification technologies because of their wireless capabilities. RFID spoofing. An attacker spoofs an RFID signals to read and record a data transmission from an RFID tag. The attacker can send his own data with the original tag ID. This makes it appear valid, gaining full access to the system. RFID cloning. An attacker clones the RFID tag by copying data from the victim's RFID tag to another RFID tag. This does not duplicate the original ID of the RFID, making it possible to know the original from the compromised. RFID unauthorized access. The majority of RFID systems lack proper authentication mechanisms, so tags can be accessed by anyone. An attacker can read, modify, or delete data. Sinkhole attack. The attacker lures all traffic from WSN nodes, causing a breach in the confidentiality of the data. It also drops all packets instead of forwarding them to the desired destination. Man-in-the-middle attack. The attacker eavesdrops onto systems, monitoring and controlling the communication between them. The attacker does not need to be physically there, but the network communication protocols are important. Denial of service. An IoT network can be attacked by more traffic data it can handle than that results in a jammed server. Routing information attacks. Direct attacks by spoofing, altering, or replaying routing information. This can cause issues creating routing loops, allowing or dropping traffic, sending false error messages, shortening or extending source routes, or even partitioning the network. Sybil attack. A malicious node that claims and impersonates identities of a larger number of nodes. This leads to neighboring WSN nodes accepting false information. Ways to enhance IoT security. Deploying access controls. Companies have a difficult time connecting assets, products, and devices, as well as controlling network access. Require IoT gear to meet security standards. Organizations hire a variety of service providers and sometimes provide equipment. It's important to keep record of updates in the life cycle of the equipment. Companies should apply the controls outlined in the common security frameworks to the IoT devices. Defend against IoT identity spoofing. Without a unique identity, a business is at risk of being spoofed. Businesses have to verify the identity of the IoT devices they're communicating with. They need to be verified to process critical communications, software updates, and downloads. Don't let IoT devices initiate network connections. By creating a one-way connection, the IoT devices won't be able to connect to internal systems. This limits an attacker's ability to help to explore and attack network segments. Enterprises can also enforce connections to IoT devices to go through jump hosts. Give IoT a network of its own. Creating a wireless network for the device requires a SSID, VLAN, and the capacity to route through a firewall traffic. The wireless network would be configured and managed from the centralized location. Vending machines, for example, that need internet run on the same hardware but on a separate VLAN. IoT security measures that can be taken to protect IoT devices. IoT manufacturers should build security in the design phase, building secure tamper-proof hardware, ensuring secure upgrades, providing firmware updates, and performing dynamic testing. Anytime a device comes with default logins, you should update them using strong password authentication. Public key infrastructure, PKI, and digital certificates provide the trust and control within the development of IoT devices. These distribute and identify public encryption keys, secure data exchanges, and verify identities over networks. Application performance indicator. Security protects the integrity of data being sent from devices to back-end systems and verifies only authorized devices can communicate with APIs. A unique identifier is important within every device to understand everything about it, especially the proper security measures for that device. Hardware security makes devices tamper-proof and tamper-evident. Network security ensures port security. This includes disabling port forwarding, anti-malware use, firewall and intrusion detection system, and blocking unauthorized IP addresses. Network access control helps identify, track, and monitor IoT devices connecting to a network. Security gateways can apply features like firewalls to keep hackers from accessing the IoT devices that connect due to their higher processing power, memory, and capabilities. Patch management and continuous software updates provide updates on devices and software. Security teams should always keep up with updates due to modern threats and security measures. Integrating teams can help companies ensure proper controls are added to devices during the phases. Consumer education is important because of the dangers of IoT systems. Updating default credentials and updating software and more can be the responsibility of the consumer. These are my references and of course the answer to my joke. So the question was, how many programmers does it take to change a light bulb? The answer is none. It's a hardware problem. And more references. Thank you for listening to my presentation.